Hey, everybody. Hey, welcome to the office with Tarika Said Again. And today we have a special guest. His name is Jerry Kinley.
Thank you. Thank you, Targa, for having me.
Yes, sir. Welcome and thank you for coming in. And he is a mortician, you all. Yep, you heard me. I'm going to say it again. A mortician, better known as the Undertaker.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the purpose or the reason behind me asking him in the office today, because remember last week we had a insurance agent and he talked about life insurance and the importance of having everything in place. So, other words, preparedness versus unpreparedness. I'm gonna stop talking and let him take the floor.
All right. Well, I am a licensed film director and embalmer.
Okay.
There's a difference. You have some individuals that are licensed film directors that don't want to participate in the embalming process.
Okay.
And then you have some film directors that are just licensed embalmers, don't want to participate in the funeral director aspect of it. Now, the difference is a funeral director that is licensed is able to sit down with the family to make funeral arrangements with the family, basically discuss numbers.
Okay.
How much the total cost of the cost and goods services selected by the family. As to what a licensed embalmer is in the back room, in the prep room, preparing the deceased individual for the embalming process. Mm-hmm. And then as far as cosmetics, prepping the body, and dressing and casket.
Okay. So that definitely sounds like a difference.
Yes, it is a difference.
Okay, sounds like you get to do it all.
Huh? I get to do it all. So from the initial call from the family when they call the funeral home, when their loved one passes away, usually either myself or the funeral home staff will answer the call, take the first call, mm-hmm. get the vital information to get the death certificate started. And then we allow the family to gather with their family members to decide on a day and time they would like to come into the funeral home, or if the licensed funeral director, if they prefer the licensed funeral director to come to their residence to sit down with the family. It might be a lot more comfortable for them to make funeral arrangements for their loved ones. So.
Okay. And I'm sure during this time, that is vitally important for the family members. Something to just make it a little bit easier, as we would say, a seamless process, because they already have to deal with a lot anyway.
Correct.
Yes, of losing a loved one. Mm-hmm. So just in thinking, like, I know you mentioned as far as, taking the phone calls, if you can kind of give me some background information on the process, like when you take them in the room or you're discussing these things with them, trying to choose the best dressing for them, the casket, the colors, what they want, what they don't want. Like, what does that look like? Because some people haven't experienced that, right? They don't know what to look for. When this happens, because we know it's inevitable, right? Everybody has an expiration date. And one thing I always talk about, is addictive patterns. And they're positive or they could be negative. And a lot of times we shy away from different conversations because it might be hurtful, because, we don't want to deal with it right now. So having those difficult conversations that we know are necessary and needed, I think that helps the process. Right. You know what I mean? So if you can just kind of give me a little more.
Yeah, from the initial start when the family or the legal next to kin comes to the funeral home. Mm-hmm. Now, some funeral home firms are different. Some funeral home firms, they do have packages.
Okay.
With what is included in their doing the funeral arrangements, so the family can have a selection of different packages as far as burial or cremation, and then also in the packages it includes what's included. Mm-hmm. As far as, is there a metal casket included or wood casket, rental casket, how many funeral programs. But some funeral homes firms, they do have, the family comes in, they don't have funeral packages. Okay. So they what they call is itemized. So whatever the family selects, they will go through that. The funeral director will go through that process, trying to make it as comfortable and show as much empathy as possible with the family. And you just give them a list of basic things that you would need to conduct a traditional funeral service or a traditional funeral service followed by cremation.
And see, I didn't know that there was a such thing as renting caskets. I just thought if I see them during the service in the casket, then most likely they're going to be buried in that casket. So that's new for me. Okay.
Yeah, some funeral homes, they will either have rental caskets on display or they will offer the family to purchase that casket, that rental casket.
And I mean, I love that idea because I'm sure it points back to the finances, you know, what they can afford and what they can't afford. I did hear you talk about cremation.
Yes.
Because I know back in the day, I would say years ago, that was a thing. Like people didn't want their loved ones, they would say, to be cremated or burned up, right? You know, just in layman terms. Yes. They shied away from that. They didn't want that. But it's becoming more of a thing nowadays with the cremation. And I've even seen crematories, you know, in driving around the neighborhoods, you know, that's an actual thing that's going on. And people are choosing, obviously, to go that route if you have a whole business, you know, that's specializing in that part of it. Before you tell me about it, give me a comparison between a family being prepared. What does that look like versus a family that is unprepared?
Most families that are prepared when their loved one passes away, what I mean by prepared is their loved one does have a life insurance. If they don't have a life insurance, they have already set up pre-need arrangements. So when that time comes, the funds are there. They are used towards their funeral expenses.
And what is that word again? Say it again.
Pre-need.
Pre-need. Yes. Okay. Okay. I hadn't heard that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you can what a pre-need is, the individual that's living. They will set an appointment with a licensed funeral director, sit down with a licensed funeral director, and say, this is the color casket I want. This is the color flowers or the type of flowers I want to be on the foot end of the casket. This is how many programs. This is who I want to speak at my funeral service.
Okay, that's really prepared.
Yeah. And what the licensed funeral director, what they do is they draw up a contract. Of course, they will show the casket and that individual will select that casket. Sealers versus non-sealers caskets. Okay. Those are two different caskets. Metal casket or wood casket. And basically, then the licensed funeral director, with taxes and everything included, they will have a total amount. And then what that individual will do, will pay, they will set up a pre-need account with a pre-need company to where they will pay monthly or they will write a check in full and send it to the pre-need company. Expenses are already paid.
Okay, so pre-need versus a life insurance put in place. That's what preparedness looks like versus.
Right. And I usually tell some families, because they want to come into the funeral home and they already have a life insurance policy, but they want to set up a pre-need. And I usually tell them, well, if you got a life insurance policy, there's really, and it's debatable. You really don't need to do a pre-need as long as your life insurance doesn't lapse.
Right.
Just keep it
current.
Yeah. But what you can do is do a pre-arrangement. So basically, that funeral director will go write down your desires when that time comes, and they will create a file for you. Okay. And make copies for you to take home to keep for your records. Okay. Or for your next kid or beneficiary, so they know. And hopefully, your family members or who you ever desire to handle your funeral arrangements when you're gone, they will honor your wishes. Okay. So, most of the time, the funeral home will honor your wishes, but sometimes family members, they like to change things.
Right. So then going back to the cremation process, you've already shared with us what I guess you would say, the standard burial process and preparation. So for those that choose to be cremated or their loved ones to be cremated, and I know we talked about how that wasn't a theme, you know, at one point, but you have a lot of people that are choosing that. But I do want to say, because at one point it was the myth, people were choosing it, would you say, because it was the cheaper route? But now people are choosing it because of different circumstances, I've found, such as, what you've seen on the news where you have, what is it, tombstones, headstones being, I'm thinking about it. Hey, damage. Right, being damaged, seeing them float down the street, them putting them on top of one another. I've even heard them being vandalized. Exactly. So some people are choosing this route because they don't want the headache of having to deal or something like that to happen to their loved one.
Usually when I sit down with families, it depends on their finances. Some families are weary nowadays, and years ago about cremation. But and some years back when I was in school, the cremation rate in the United States was at a certain percentage. I believe it was probably around maybe 45-50%.
Okay.
Now, if you go on and click on the national rate here in the United States, cremation, I believe, it's in the late 60 percentile or the 70 percentile.
Wow.
So cremation is on the rise. That's because the economy and people's finances, they just can't afford to have a traditional burial. So what I usually tell families is, if you choose the route for a funeral service followed by cremation, you can still have a celebration of life instead of having a full casket burial. Once the cremation process is completed, you can take your loved one's cremated remains and bury them at the cemetery of your choice.
Oh.
It's a lot less than burying that casket. I said, then you, at a later date, you can turn around and buy a headstone. And then on birthdays and holidays, traditions, you can still come to the cemetery and visit your
Wow. So they would keep the remains at the burial site.
Yeah, the cremains will be buried at the cemetery.
Right.
Or you can put them in what we call a column burial or niche. Of course, you can get engraving of your loved one's name and date of birth.
Okay. There are verses on your mantle in your house. Okay. I didn't know that was an option. I'm learning, y'all. Yeah. I'm learning.
And just here, not too long ago, I attended a funeral directors meeting, and I know in other countries, I believe in Europe, maybe some 10 or 20 years ago, it was discussed that cremation was 80% in this over in Europe. It was discussed in the funeral directors meeting that for some reason the United States is always 10 years or 20 years behind Europe. But since it's rising into the 70% projectile, that eventually when we get into the 80% projectile, some of these bigger funeral home firms are going to have to make some arrangements to compete with all these cremations, direct cremations, because a lot of people are doing a lot of direct cremations, especially in other countries.
Got you.
They might come in. Most funeral homes, they do offer where they offer direct cremation. They might, what we call a courtesy view, where they set up a time where they, just immediate family only will come in, pay their final respects to their loved one. Then no embalming is involved, and then their loved one is transported to the crematory for the cremation process.
Got you. Now, what I did find out in just doing some research, like there was a threefoldness, and when we talk about threes, right? When we're talking about unity, no matter like what we do, whatever our occupation is, it follows like a threefoldness. When we talk about divine numerology,
right.
And with the cremation, I know one of the steps they say you have to prepare the body. whatever that looks like, as far as taking jury off, or if they have any
Pacemaker.
medical, devices, and then they put them in a crematory container. Is it a different name for it?
Yes,
Like,
it's alternative container.
okay,
So it's usually
so some type
cardboard
of container.
combustible.
Okay.
That'll be cremated in a retort.
Okay. And then from there, that's where you all would transport them or put them in the crematory, like the chamber. Okay. And so with that, I was like, wow, that's like a 1, 2, 3 steps, to that process. And then time wise, I believe, I don't know if that's something you're at liberty to talk about, but like how long do they keep them in there?
In the retort, the cremation oven, for understanding purposes. The average is usually, I think the first individual that's cremated that day, because you have to warm the retort up.
Okay.
And that usually takes about 3 to 4 hours for that individual, depending on their weight.
Got you. Okay.
About 3 to 4 hours, and then after that, then each person is usually roughly estimated about 2 hours.
Okay. That's just me. I be wanting to know everything, y'all. It's like no questions off limit.
And I know most retorts or crematory operators, they try not to let that retort or that oven get past 2,000 degrees.
Yes, I did read that temperature wise.
Yeah, because then people in the community will call the fire department. We see flames shooting out of the smokestack.
Okay.
But it's really it's just too hot. So they try to keep it between no more than 1,800 degrees.
And then from there, that's where you would give the family the remains and them to keep it.
Right.
Okay.
And I know I've been asked questions many times. What does cremated remains look like after the cremation process? So I always tell families when you have different beaches around the world.
Okay.
Some beaches you have clear white soft sand. You got some beaches are kind of rough. You have the smaller seashells that's kind of rough on your feet when you're walking on the sand. And the sand might have some kind of gray looking color to it. You have some sands, beaches that have the tan, and so the cremation process. If you ever were to see the crematory operator open it up, once your loved one is going through that cremation process, it looks like wood logs and branches burned in the fireplace.
Okay.
And then, depending on the individual during their life, their illness or sickness, medication will change the color of the cremated remains. So I always tell family members, your loved one's cremated remains look just like the sand at the beach. Okay. So it kind of brings comfort, because when you go to the beach, you don't know if you're walking on seashells or you don't know if you're walking on someone's cremated remains. Yes.
Okay, and that's an actual thing. Like, I know people would go to the beach, or they would pour their family members' remains, out there in the ocean. So that's something you mention that, because that's an actual thing. It's nothing you just made up. You know what I mean? So yes, that's an actual thing. So you are right, and I'm glad you gave them that visual, like create imagery for them, so they can kind of have an idea of what that would look like for them.
Yeah, most families, when I describe that to them, then it gives them a little piece of comfort.
Right. Well, you have definitely educated me, and I know you have educated them on the proper, as far as being prepared, unprepared, and just taking the standard burial, I guess you would say, versus the cremation. One last question, I just thought about it. Going back to the standard, right? Because you say you do it all.
Right.
So have you performed the autopsy and them cutting what from the clavicle, making that letter Y on the body. Like,
yeah. So usually the once the funeral home receive your loved one, if it's usually an autopsy is performed if it was a homicide, car accident, you died on the job,
okay,
or if you have unknown health problems and you pass away at home in your sleep.
Okay.
They usually will perform an autopsy. Or if the family, if your loved one passes in the hospital unexpectedly, and the family just has questions, then usually they will request an autopsy.
But other than that, you don't perform an autopsy. Yeah. Okay.
So what the medical examiner or the coroner will perform the autopsy. So once the funeral home embalmer like myself, we receive the body. Of course, the incision is a sharp Y on the chest and the abdominal, or it can be a U Y. And then the medical examiner or the coroner cuts from one ear to the other ear in the back. And,
your skull, the
put your face
mask, as we say. That's your mask.
Calvarian cap on. So it's a lot of work when you have to embalm an autopsy body compared to a normal case. So because you got to do a lot of sewing up after you.
That's what I was going to ask. So you have to do the stitching or the sewing. And is that like more when autopsy? Well, I'm figuring when you have to do more to the body.
It can cost.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to charge the family a little bit extra. Even when it comes down to restorative art, where you have to unfortunately put somebody's cranial cavity, their skull back together, or trauma to the face, trauma to the hands. You want to restore it, everyone to make them look lifelike.
Right.
It can be a little costly, but I always tell families when I meet with them, I love embalming, and I love taking care of people's loved ones when their loved ones pass away, and I'll make everyone look as natural as possible. Some embalmers, unfortunately, some staff members that work in the prep room, they like to do cosmetics. They like to cake all this makeup on your loved one's face. I don't do that, and I always tell people if your loved one has suffered some trauma, I can put Humpty Dumpty back together.
Okay.
So, I guess one of these days I might find a better terminology instead of using Humpty Dumpty, but I can.
You basically saying you're good at what you do.
Yes.
So nothing wrong with that. And it definitely seemed like it's some artistry to it as well as science, in doing what you do. The average person just can't come in and do your job.
Yeah, because sometimes you got to make someone a new ear. You got to make some lips, eyeballs, nose. So I can make it look lifelike and family. I've never had anyone, knock on wood, ever displeased with
what you have done.
With my personal work I've done. And I'm gonna tell you one thing I really hate. It kind of burns me up. Those that have not been trained right, and I go to another funeral service, and I walk up to the casket, and because you got some funeral homes they will not what we call tissue build their loved one's hands or face.
They won't.
Just looking dried out, emaciated. So I can't stand that. So build it up, build out. Sometimes you see people's loved ones because the average person, they don't know.
Right.
So a lot of these funeral homes they get away with. If you know and you see it, so.
Gotcha. Well, you have definitely educated us this afternoon here.
I gave you a little bit too much information.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. So I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining in for another session here at Tarika Say It Again. Hopefully you join us again next week.
And I want to thank you, Tarika Williams, Say It Again, for inviting me as a guest.
Thank you.
I'm more than welcome to come back anytime if you need.
Okay, y'all let me know if he needs to come back, break something else down for us.
Answer any questions.
All right, well, check us out. Our website, addictivepatterns.com. Please subscribe. And if you want to follow us on Addictive Patterns, Instagram or TikTok. All right, have a good one.
Take care.